Disclosure is not important to me, by the way. It's a trivial thing, and all of these shows. There, there's a new one coming out. Just was at South by Southwest the other day, and I've seen most of it, and it's another one of these things that doesn't actually get off the dime, where 36 different people, all of them, some of them old friends of mine, and some of them people I've never known before, tell of their knowledge of this, which is very extensive. And that's wonderful, and it's very convincing. But to get off the dime, the certain things have to be taken out into the public space. This is why I have been maintaining for years that one of the craft that we possess should be placed in the Smithsonian Museum. I think that would help a lot. The next thing that needs to be done is there are a number of, or at least were years ago, and I hope they still exist, but God knows the people involved in this are very cavalier about all of this. So there were bodies of some of the small beings, not the taller ones, that were in our possession and that were thoroughly analyzed as best we could with the abilities we had over the years. They were arrived in our possession in 1947, and the various types of analysis that were done in phases as our science became more sophisticated. The last analytical work that was done on in DNA, as far as I know. Their bodies were at Fort Detrick for a long time. Where they are now and whether they even still exist, I don't know, because one of the things the Defense Department does to keep itself, keep its hands clean, is it offloads material, debris, everything it has physically, especially to private industry. That way, if you file, and also records, a lot of records about this are kept in the Iron Mountain facility, and then the record storage facilities, one of which owned by EG&G Rotron in Woodstock, New York, contains, I believe, a lot of the older records. But they're not in the possession of the Defense Department anymore. They've been probably illegally offloaded to defense contractors so that DOD can safely say, we don't know anything. We don't have anything. We can't find a single piece of paper.
Right.
Go ahead. Shall I go on?
No,
or you
yeah,
want
I know what you're saying. They cover their tracks. Absolutely. They don't
You're
want
right.
this out. The experiencer is the most, I would say, dangerous element to what's really going on. I mean, and you said you've been the most, negated person in these conferences, the Soul Conference, all that. So you talk about that.
I can't speak. I can't speak at any of these conferences. I'm not allowed to because I'm gonna. But I don't really care about that.
Right.
I couldn't care about any of that. Disclosure doesn't really interest me very much. I hardly ever think about it. What I am interested in is the relationship between you, me, or actually I did that wrong. Me, you, there it goes, and the visitors. That's what I care about.
Right. And that's your fourth, your last book is about that. So please go over that. And I think people should buy this book. It's a breakthrough, but yeah, please.
Great. Buy my book. Yeah, it's called The Fourth Mind. This is my whole life. It's not just The Fourth Mind. This is every book I've ever written is about opening this door in our lives. The face on the cover of Communion designed, it's right over there, and the painting is right up there beside the painting of Anne. Designed by the visitors, which I was not aware of at the time that I was having it painted. I was sat right beside the artist while it was being painted, and just told him exactly what to do. What I did not know was they were in my head helping me I mean, they were. I mean, you can read about how it was done in communion. That I was aware of, but I didn't know why they wanted this painting to be so precise. It is not a precise image of their heads. Their heads are much bigger, but it's let's put it this way: it's the right size to fit on a book cover and make the eyes big enough to do what they wanted. And those eyes are the beginning of contact where it counts between you and me and us and them. The contacts with the governments are a side event. They're not that important. Our souls and our relationship to their souls is of great importance. The latest
do they
book,
have a soul? I mean, people have questioned that. Is it greater than, is it, I mean, and in some ways, all souls seem to be the same on some level. So talk about that, please.
Okay, yeah, okay. Well, in order to talk about that, we have to talk about voiced and non-voiced species. And let's begin there. A voiced species is a species like us. We communicate with voice through the air into each other's ears. They are an unvoiced species. They do not have vocal cords. In the new book, The Fourth Mind, a big part of it is demystifying their biology and their anatomy and their genetics and their brain function in detail and accurately. The first time that's ever been done inside or outside, because believe me, the work that's been done on the inside is all scientific work, very little analytical work, if any, about what is this about. No sociology whatsoever, no anthropology, because they can't address this anthropologically because they don't know what they're like. And forget about these stories about people going to other worlds. It has not happened. The Serpo thing, it's fiction. So, okay, we are a voiced species. They are an unvoiced species. This is the difference. Our consciousness is isolated in here. Our eyes, ears, nose, our senses bring everything into us. Their consciousness is different. They have no vocal cords. They cannot speak. They don't even have a pharynx like a bird. They can make sounds, one basic sound, well, a number of different tones, depending on what they're trying to communicate. And these sounds are truly extraordinary, but they are not words. All of the communication is telepathic. This means that even though they have individual personalities, and I hear these people from the intelligence community and the military say, hive mind, how stupid. They have individual personalities. The taller ones, the 5 foot and the 7 foot tall ones, which are two different levels of the same species, and the little tiny ones, which are mostly the ones we see when we do see them. The little ones are like avatars of the taller ones. In other words, when you see 3 or 4 of the little ones, somewhere there's a taller one who is in control of those bodies. They're like extensions, and they're expendable. So if they're going somewhere dangerous, you're going to see the little ones. That is to say, if they're going to show up in your house, it's highly unlikely, very unusual, you would see one of the big ones. You would see the little ones. Okay, so they have a very rich general mind. They have a single consciousness and many different personalities. That's what they are. And it's very, very different from us. Voiced species, from what I understand from them, do not have a very long lifespan. They are ephemera in consciousness. But what we do have that has a long lifespan is the same thing that they have, that is the non-physical part of us. The non-physical part of us is in unity. It is humanity. And when you die, like when my wife died, right after she died, she was an absolute master of these things. That woman back there who called the book Communion, she seemed to be just a kid from Ann Arbor, and I was a kid from San Antonio, Texas. We were nothing special. We met, we fell in love, and that woman changed the world more than I did. Never forget that. In any case, she understood that the soul was indeed a living reality, and she began to plan her death 9 months before it happened, long before I knew she was going to die. She had already made a decision not only about what to do, but when to die. She created an avatar, and she taught me from after death how to communicate with her. It's all in a book called The Afterlife Revolution. And she did it in a way that she didn't communicate at first directly with me. She communicated with friends instead. And then she used that type of communication to teach me how to meditate in such a way that I could relate to her. The first thing she said was that she said, "Whitley, I'm not Anne anymore, but I will always be Anne for you." That was humanity talking. We all have these egos, and in the Western world, they're quite big, very big. And so when we think, well, I want to survive after death, that means I want Whitley to survive after death. Whitley will be absorbed, but there is another level of us that is absolutely extraordinary and eternal and very powerful, and is literally doing this journey in the physical for a while in order to, and I can explain exactly why we're doing it, and also why we are not too far from an inflection point, not an end in our relationship to the physical, but an inflection point of significance.
Well, I want to hear that, but I also want to ask, when people become non-physical, when they pass over, do they become the non-speaking entities you're talking about, like these ETs in a sense, or is there something different?
No, they don't re-inhabit physical bodies as far as I know. I mean, they can be,
yeah,
they can be
but
born.
when humans pass over, do humans become the non-speaking species that you're talking about? Do we become that?
You know, that's a very interesting question, because there's some evidence that one form that we see are humans, had been in the human state before. These are these dark blue figures that short dark blue figures that in the medieval Central Europe were called kobolds, because they were the blue of cobalt that was found in mines. And there's some evidence that those are human beings, and that they described themselves to one of the experiencers that I knew who passed away as soul techs. That is to say, soul technologists. And when they would come to the cabin, the children would sometimes see them, and they would shine lights on the children's arms and say, "We're doctors, we're soul doctors, we're looking at your soul." And it could be that they are part of us, because another one of the experiences who came there, Laurie Barnes, had an experience in 1952 with a group of them, long before anybody knew anything about aliens. I mean, she was reading in bed, 9 months pregnant, or 7 months pregnant, I believe. And it was about 11 o'clock, and she was alone in the house. Her husband was a pianist and out on a gig. And she noticed movement out of the corner of her eye and looked up, and there were these beings standing beside her, beside the bed. And of course, she was absolutely horrified. because, geez, I mean, that wasn't something you expected to see in the 50s at all, anything like that. And she recoiled in horror at what she was seeing. And the lead one tried to calm her down by saying, "Do not be afraid. We're not here for you. We're interested in the girl child you're carrying." And of course, the child, in the 50s, you didn't know whether it was a girl or a boy or what until it was born. And so, and it turned out it was a girl, and I've met her, and she's a very nice person. She's a successful person in this life. And no one has any idea why this even happened. But the "we're not here for you" suggests that sometimes they do come for us at the end of our lives.
Right.
But the next thing that happened was, after it said, "Do not fear us, and we're here for the girl child," she said, she was still in a panic. And he said, "Why are you so afraid of us?" And put his hand on her wrist. And she said, "Because you're so ugly." And then something was said that might be very important. It said, "My dear, one day you will look just like us."
Wow. Wow. That gives me the chills there.
Does that mean that we are the caterpillars and they're the butterflies? Because after all, who knows how a caterpillar would see a butterfly? They might find the butterflies absolutely terrifying.
Right. But these ideas of non-speakers also remind me of what the telepathy tapes, which has been a common topic this last couple of days, talk about the non-speaking autistic children that are telepathic, that we've shut down that parts of us. So, but we have that capacity to be non-speakers in that sense, right?
We have the capacity to be telepathic and voiced. Absolutely. And this is, the visitors had told me a few years ago, and I never go into predictions. I wait until something actually does happen that they say, because they say a lot of things that do not happen. This did happen, which was that all of a sudden, about 6 months ago, I found myself in touch with Kai Dickens of the telepathy tapes. And I realized, this is it. They have told me that this is the human future, that we must do this, and also said that it's been hidden from us. The Russians, the French, the English, the UK, the Chinese, all have telepaths working in their governments. I'm pretty sure they all do. I know the United States and Russia certainly do. And they hide this from the common people, because the last thing the ones who control us want is for us to be able to communicate that way. But we have to learn, because if we do not learn, we remain helpless. There is an extinction event unfolds in X number of years, and most of us are victims of it. The super arrogant people that intend to survive it do so, but they don't have, as it turns out, and I'm not making any number predictions or day predictions, it turns out that they do not have a large enough DNA pool. And that has to not happen. Many more of us have to survive. Telepathy is a great key, because among other things, it brings peace. And we can be telepathic. We can be.
And we are. Alexis Brooks just went over the whole thing, how we all are. But I want to ask you,
has got a lot of insight into this.
Yeah.
Yeah,
What's that?
we all are. All we have to
Yeah.
do is know that.
Yes. Yes. So the big thing you've just brought up a few times is this nexus point, this place, this this moment in history that seems to be approaching. I mean, you don't like predictions, but give us that. What do you see coming?
Well,
What's
I'm not a prophet, but and I don't need to be. And people don't like to hear about it. They've all been bamboozled and brainwashed into believing there's no such thing as global warming, there's no such thing as climate change. I'm sorry, there is. And nature
yeah.
is just numbers. Nature doesn't care about what we think, it doesn't care about our ideologies, our political beliefs, or anything. It's just numbers. And the numbers don't lie. What the US government is now doing is destroying our ability to know what those numbers are. And why are they doing that? Because they want it to creep up on us so we will be maximally helpless when we end up in a situation rather suddenly, and God knows when, where we don't have enough food, we don't have enough water, and we might not even have a viable atmosphere at one point. And going back to the days of the Roman Empire, the climate changed then in 100 AD. It became drier. People began to not be able to get enough food. Their immune systems were stressed. And this empire was destroyed by a series of plagues that occurred over the next 400 years until it was finally completely ruined. You see our future when you go to Rome and you see their past. That's our future. And it's for the same reason. The weather matters. It is not saying it's not happening and killing all of our scientific ability to detect it is just nonsense. It is happening.
But isn't something approaching with these beings, with the phenomena, with our ability to make contact, if you want to call it that? Is there something happening?
It's all intersecting at the same time. They've told me that when everyone on Earth knows for certain that the planet cannot support us any longer, they will come. Now, does that mean the cavalry is going to come and save us? I don't know what it means, but I have a very strong feeling that is not what it means. I think that it's going to be a rough time, and we don't need to have that. But it looks to me like we are going to have it because the Russians don't care. The Chinese put window dressing on it, makes it look like they care. The United States has decided to abandon it altogether. So the only ones who do care and can do something about it are the Europeans, and they're trying. But the world's number one polluters, India, the United States, and China, it used to be Russia too, but their economy is so decrepit that they're not really a factor much anymore. India, the United States, and China are not doing anything. India is absolutely doing nothing. The United States was doing a lot, but now it's going to do nothing. And over this 4-year period, it's a very critical period in this. By the end of this period, there are going to be so many things wrong with the environment. It will be crystal clear to many, many people, but not everyone, that we're in deep trouble. Will we survive it? I think so, but it's going to be a near thing.
But the other factor is if we start to get in touch with these beings that are, I think, here to wake us up, there's a chance we could tap into this other level. I mean, that's my.
Absolutely.
So how do we do that? Whitley, you are the most experienced experiencer that is probably on the planet, the most lucid experiencer. How would you suggest we start to tap into that relationship, which you've had for, I don't know, 40 years or something? Yeah.
Well, the first thing to do is for the people who are already tapped into it is to put your imagination in your pocket and try to see what's actually going on in your life, because we see it through the lens of our hopes and dreams and fears. We want it to be a wonderful, loving thing. We want it, we fear it if we come at it from a Christian demon point of view or whatever. Or we see the Space Brothers, or we see this, or we see that. All of that's horribly weak. It's horribly weak. You need to learn to see the visitors the way you see other people. That's the beginning. And that means that you see them, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because they have got lots of different personalities and lots of different approaches to us and to their own lives. And the other problem is that we are a little bit like, there's so much that they know that we don't know, that we are a little bit like dogs in the house. We can understand what we need to understand to be human, but there's a lot that's going on all around us that we cannot understand. We cannot understand how consciousness really works. It's very difficult for us to come out of our egos. There's a simple exercise, which I call the integration exercise. I used to call it the sensing exercise, but that's not enough. It needs a better word that enables the attention, which is incredibly powerful. Probably the single most powerful thing we have is our ability to move and control our attention. People are looking at me right now. I've got your attention. But you know what? You can keep some of your attention for yourself. And you can learn to do this always, so that part of your attention is within you and part of your attention is going out into the world. When you live like this, and especially when you meditate like this, and you take your attention and you put it on your body and you let your thoughts roll, you put your attention on your body, something happens. Specifically, as Anne Strieber explained, and the visitors too, they can see you. You begin to glow in a way that you can be seen. Now, we're Americans, most of us listening to this, we're consumers. Or we're Europeans and we don't believe we have a soul, and we're not going to go down that path. So we'll do this 2 or 3 times and nothing happens. No orbs come into our house or anything. And we think, oh, screw it. You have to do it for a lifetime. You have to make this part of your life. I've been doing it since 1969. I do it 4 times a day. I do it at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, at 7 in the evening, at 11 at night, and then usually at 3 o'clock in the morning or thereabouts. Why do I do it at that hour? That is a time that in yoga is called Brahma Muhurta time, the time when the mind is most open. I have written all of my books since Annie passed away by communicating and communing with her and others in that level, including many visitors. It's not downloads. It's working by committee, and they function as editors. The books are mine, but the editorial ideas are theirs. That's quite possible to do. We can live like this. Annie called the book Communion, not Contact, because it is about the sharing of being. Have you got the guts to share yourself with someone else? Our egos say, oh, I can't do that. But you can. And when you do, then we get into real relationship with our visitors.
Well, it's been, from your example, it's been quite a difficult path, but you've sacrificed a lot. You've revealed, you were vulnerable. Your process is sort of a model for, in a way, what we all have to go through. Would you say that?
It's not easy, but it's also fascinating and fun. and scary. It can be very scary. And, I'm used to that, to the point where I'm pretty sure that one of the reasons that they chose me and not some scientist. I know a couple of scientists who knew enough about this and are really rather jealous that they didn't get chosen to do what I'm doing. But I think the big part of the reason they chose me was I was a horror novelist. In other words, I was a person who could be counted on to be entertained by fear. When I first started, I realized if I'm going to make this, it was about 6 weeks when I struggled with trying to figure out what had happened to me in December of 1985, which was when I was abducted. And finally, I got to the point where I couldn't have it. There was no other explanation except that it had really happened, and therefore that I'd been abducted by apparent aliens, although I still don't know exactly what they are. And I said to Anne, "Hey, Annie, you know what we need to do? Why don't we go out and walk out in the woods tonight and go back to the place where I'd figured out pretty well where they had taken me from. Go back to that place and just meditate there to try to give them an idea that we're ready for more." And she said, "Okay, great idea. You go ahead and do that." I said, "Well, wait a minute. What about, I don't necessarily want to do it alone." She said, "Whitley, I didn't get abducted. And I've got a little boy sleeping in the next room. So I'm staying home. But I think it's time for you to start doing this." I'm telling you, I've never known fear like I knew that first night. I got to the edge of the garden and the woods were there. I could not step off the grass into the woods. But over time, I began to be able to overcome my fear with my curiosity, basically. And they responded. I had a computer going crazy here. Pardon me. Never mind. If I slightly change color, it's because there's another computer here that is causing this, and I can't turn it off.
That's okay.
Okay. All right. Okay. So, and the relationship commenced because I was saying to my fear, "The hell with you. My curiosity means more to me. This relationship, if it can happen, means more to me than my fear." Or my anger, because that was there too. I was angry. I'd gotten raped, for God's sakes, raped. And I learned to live with that anger, to tell myself, this anger is part of you. It's completely justified. There's no excuse for what they did to you. But I'm still curious. I'm going to try to do something about this, guys.
It's okay. It's kind of interesting changing colors there. It's like there's a UFO.
Interesting, but I do not.
It's like a UFO in your living room there, Whitley.
Yeah, maybe.
Okay.
Okay, I think I can make this go to sleep. Yeah, there, it's gone. Okay. Yeah, I realized that I was changing colors, and I thought, is it a mood swings? What's going on here? And then I realized it was this computer. But
yeah,
next,
but
let's keep going.
Oh, go ahead. You finish. I also had a question about being a horror writer or horror fiction. Is that I think I've said this to you. Maybe your early childhood contacts made you. I mean, my thought into a horror writer. That's screen memories.
It's possible because I don't remember my childhood contacts as being frightening, but I do remember some things I used to do that would suggest they were. For example, we had a big hedge at the front of our lawn called a ligustrum hedge. It was about 70 feet tall. And it had a lot of long, thin branches in it. You could cut these branches off and strip the ends of them and whittle them down into a little spear. And every once in a while, I would make spears and I would stack them up in a certain corner of the yard. And in the night, I would go out there, and the yard next to us was very large. It was larger than ours. Ours was big, but theirs was twice as big. It was 2 acres. And I would see this little UFO in that yard, and I would know they were coming for me, and I would take my spears and I would throw them one after another across the fence at this thing. Little boy, what's he going to do with these spears? Come on. And but that I would do that, and I wanted them to go away. I did not want them to get near me. Then it would be the next evening.
Right. Right. And you also wrote the book called The Night School.
Secret School. Yeah.
Yeah, Secret School. Also, there's a question from this woman, Selena. Actually, she has a lot of questions for you here. So the fact that this woman heard the message, you're going to look like us one day, does that mean they are the same we are the same species as them? What does that mean to you?
That's a wonderful question. I don't know what it means. It could mean that we are the caterpillar form and they are the butterfly form. Or we're the tadpoles and they're the frogs. Maybe that's a little bit better because they look a lot like frogs, those blue ones. Or it could be that they are another species that our souls will inhabit at some point. Or even that they are us from the future. We don't know what it means, but it seems to me that because of what the children saw at the reported at the cabin, and what Laurie Barnes said, that somehow or another we're connected to those particular beings in this particular way.
Right. You know, another question, I've heard you answer this before, but it's so touching in the way you had expressed it before. What made you go back out to meet those Greys after they did such awful abuse to you, raping and all that? Why would you want to go out and encounter that again?
My curiosity overcame my fear, and it overcame my anger, and the sense that this was somebody else. This was somebody else. It really was. I was irresistible. And, I mean, they roughed me up plenty. And the most awful thing they did to me was take semen from my body. My body, my life force, my children took them from me. But that didn't mean that I was not extraordinarily interested in them. I wanted to know more about their lives, their cultures, their needs, their meanings, what they wanted from us. Why were they harvesting sexual material from human beings? I wanted to know all of those things. But more than that, I wanted to have a relationship, no matter how flawed they may be. And let's face it, anybody who does that to people, takes semen, takes eggs, roughs people up in the night, doesn't give them a chance to make their own decisions, kidnaps them right out of their bedrooms. Those people are flawed, or they wouldn't be acting like that. I mean, they're not angels. So I wanted to know more about them. And I also thought, they're flawed. We're flawed too. I mean, after all, we think, oh, we're not flawed. And then I just say, well, how about the Holocaust, or what just happened in Gaza, or Stalin, or Mao Zedong, and the millions upon millions dead in World War I for nothing. We're flawed also. And all that was in my head when I went out to see them again, because I figured they're just like us. They're flawed. Maybe this is the foundation for a real relationship.
But some people are saying, well, trauma, first of all, awakens people. But the other thing is they're really on a bigger picture here to help us open us up to this field of consciousness. So, yeah, their bedside manners may not be the best, but they're
No,
here.
they're not.
But they're here. But they're here to help. This is what I'm not saying that's true. I'm just saying there's a lot of people who have said that.
They want us to survive, clearly. There are two messages that come from them consistently. One is the danger of nuclear war, and these are messages, they're not downloads. I'm very wary of downloads because I think they can be imagination and people don't realize that. In any case, but they have demonstrated very clearly the dangers of nuclear weapons by doing what they did at nuclear missile sites in the United States and Russia, and their interest in nuclear facilities of all kinds, with all kinds of flyovers and so forth. Oh man, sorry about that. All kinds of flyovers and so forth. And the environmental message has been so consistent with so many of the close encounter witnesses that you have to believe that even though it is not being demonstrated like with the in the case of the missile silos missiles being retargeted and stuff, it's still so consistent over so many years that those are their two issues. Those are both core survival issues. They are the two core survival issues of humanity. There's a possible third issue, which is disease, but they have not addressed that. So maybe they don't expect us to get into a lot of trouble with that.
But there is the other element, and the next speaker will talk about this, Preston Dennett. I'm sure you know who he is. But there's an element, right? And I've experienced this in my kind, a kind of elevation of vibration, a kind of upliftment,
yes.
Right? So, what is that about?
Yeah. Well, exactly right. We need to be able to do that in order to engage with them on a less physical and more spiritual level. And when we do that, a lot of things change because all of a sudden we are more equal partners than something to be kicked around and at the bottom of the garden. And they become respectful of us, and they become both teachers and students, because the ones who I'm with, they are definitely teachers, but they are also learning from me. We have it's a relationship. It's not them the all knowing and me the little roach crawling around trying to grab crumbs. It's a relationship, and we can have that. I'm quite certain. I think there's and the exercise I just briefly described is an exercise that increases your vibration. That's why you can be seen in this other level of reality. Why the dead can see you. My wife made it very clear that she could see me when I did this, and that's why I still have a relationship with her, because she can come to this. She can find me this way. And they can too. They can find anybody who does this. And the frustrating part is that we want some sign that they're here, and that's not necessarily going to happen. We have to, in a sense, we have to trust ourselves, because our perceptions are so numbed by the lives we live and the egos we have that it's difficult to do this. We could do it a long time ago. In the new book, in The Fourth Mind, I talk a lot about what happened to us in the past. We are a species that was profoundly traumatized in the distant past, in 12,000 years ago, to be exact. And we live in a state of traumatic amnesia. That's why we don't do telepathy anymore, but we once could. It's why we don't do a lot of things that they can do, but we once could. We can get back to that. We can.
Well, I mean, part of getting back to that is getting over the trauma. I think there's also a level of mind control in a sense by those that don't want us to wake up because
Yeah,
they want to keep us in control, religions and all those things that are in place. So
right. That's been going on since history, the history of the human species, the written history from Sumeria and Egypt on, is the history of mind control.
right.
Prior to
So
that, we didn't have it.
so how do we return to this? Maybe the autistic children, the meek shall inherit the earth. Maybe they are leading the way. Talk about that work that Kai Dickens and Dr. Diana Hennison Powell are doing to help us evolve.
That's a very perceptive segue. I'm very impressed and thankful because
Thank you.
you took this in exactly the right direction, Alan.
Thank you.
This, what Diane and Kai are doing, and the spellers, that is to say, the unvoiced people and autistic people they work with, are doing, is showing us something that we have forgotten we had, and we can regain it. Now, it takes concentration and effort, but you don't need a teacher. You just need to try. You can even do it with someone you love or a friend, and you can get into telepathic contact with them if you're patient. Annie and I did it years ago. And you do it. I mean, here's how we did it. We sat back to back, and we were silent, and one of us would bring up an image of something simple in there. I'll never forget it, in their mind, and the other one would try to guess what that image was by seeing it. And we did it for quite a while, off and on, and we never got anywhere because every time I brought something up in my mind, she came up with something else. And we finally decided we were teasing each other. And so we said, we're going to get serious about it. We went into the separated attention state, or the open attention state that I described earlier. We sat back to back, and I thought of a bottle of Heinz ketchup. And suddenly Annie said, ketchup.
Mm.
And I thought of a rose, and she said rose.
Mm.
And we went on like that for 10 or 15 minutes. And it was wonderful. And I thought to myself at the time, this is something we've done, and now we've done it, and we can go back and do it again. But we never left that state again for the rest of our lives. We were always in that contact. Then she passed on, and we're still in it.
Mm. That is beautiful. It is possible to live as a human race that is completely telepathic. Is that
I was telepathic with Annie, and I've had periods when I had like vocal telepathy where I could hear people's thoughts. And it's sort of not something I particularly would like to have. I mean, I don't want to hear thoughts. I mean, I don't want to get into people's minds like that. And the most recent one is I was very, very tired. I'd just gone to England, and I had arrived at the Airbnb, and I lay down on the bed. It was about 9 o'clock, 8 o'clock at night. I'd been flying all night and traveling all day. And I lay down, and suddenly I heard all these voices, and I thought, holy moly. It's the telepathy is turned on because I'm tired and I'm, relaxed, and my ego is out of the way. And I thought, I need to sleep. I can't sleep like this. There was nothing. It was a quiet neighborhood in Walton-on-Thames in England. And, there were people gently thinking thoughts, and someone was watching TV, and I could hear their thoughts about the fact they didn't like the program very much. And then there was a man who was hungry and trying to find some food in the refrigerator and thinking about where it was and stuff like that.
Mhm.
And I thought, I can't, I've got to get out of this because I can't sleep like this. And I just tried to relax and it faded after a while. And that's happened to me a couple times in my life. There's a trigger word that I have that if I hear it spoken, it doesn't do anything. But if I hear it in my head, it opens me telepathically. And then people or the visitors or people who know about that and have reason to want to communicate with me telepathically can do so, but I can't initiate it myself.
Well,
Except
what's that word? So,
I'm not going to tell you that word.
oh, come on.
Oh no, because for all I know, there are people who could do that and get into my head here, and I'm not doing it. I'm just telling you it's possible. I'm certainly not going to tell you my trigger
Okay, you
word.
don't have to tell me your secret word.
Damn right.
One more question, because then I'll bring Preston on. We can talk to him a little bit. You said the psionic event that Jacob Barber performed landing that craft was because they wanted him to think he was landing the craft. Is that what you still
No,
believe?
that's not what I said.
Oh,
The
okay.
psionic, what happened to Jake was he was working on trying to pick up the egg, and with his probe from his helicopter, and he was entered by a feminine presence that he found very appealing, and he said it was not it was not ontological shock to me. That means the shock of the new. It was ontological relief, and it's still in me, and I'm very glad of this. And I thought to myself, they don't know what they're doing, but they do at the same time. And I thought it was such a wonderful, courageous, true thing to say. My heart really felt strongly a connection with Jake when I heard him talking about this very personal event. What was happening was he was being viewed as an aggressor, and he was being given a level of emotional vibration that would enable him to see a more peaceful life.
Okay.
Beautiful. And that's going to happen to more than one of those soldiers who are out there with their shoot 'em ups eventually, when the time comes. The visitors don't mind if you shoot up the little avatars. They're expendable, but they will eventually get pissed off if they figure that we're not getting it.
So those little beings are like robots. They're
No, they're not robots. They're very richly endowed with consciousness, but it's just that the consciousness is being projected from the one that is controlling them. They're not separate entities. Think of them as like your hands that are somehow detached from your body. They're, in other words, they're telemetrically connected to, or telepathically, connected to the main consciousness. That, if we shot down or killed one of the biologically independent ones, I'm not sure that would be a good idea at all.